Welcome back. Today I'm going to teach you how to add evidence to your essays. This is an advanced level writing skill that you need to know if you go to high school, college, or university in an English-speaking country like the United States. I always tell my students that this is not the most exciting or fun thing that they're going to learn, but it's necessary. And after they learn it, they feel more comfortable in their classes and they get better grades on their essays. So today I'm going to teach you what evidence is and how to add it to your essays. So first, what is evidence? Evidence is information that proves that something is true. The best example is to think of what happens in a courtroom. A person has been charged with a crime and the person is on trial, but we don't know if the person committed the crime or not. The lawyer's job is to bring evidence to show that the person committed the crime or that the person did not commit the crime. In our essay, we want to use evidence to support our ideas. You want to be sure that we can believe the evidence, so you want to look for what we call reliable sources, which are sources that we can trust or that we know are good sources of information. So the first place that you probably want to look is your textbook or newspaper articles. We usually think that evidence should be from an expert or someone who knows a lot about the subject. So how do we use evidence in our essays? You want to think that most of the essay is your own discussion based on what you know about the topic. So you're going to think about what you have learned in your class from listening to your professor, discussing with classmates, and reading your book. And then you want to discuss the idea based on that knowledge that you already have. However, you're going to use pieces of evidence in your paragraphs to help to support or make your ideas stronger, to show that your ideas are true. To do that, you want to think that your paragraph should be mostly your own discussion of the topic, and then there will be some pieces of evidence to support your ideas. So maybe the paragraph has about 25% of the sentences are evidence. Definitely not more than 50%. Maybe in one paragraph you have 1 or 2 sentences of evidence to support your ideas. It depends on the topic and the type of essay that you're writing, but that's a good general guideline. Okay, so how to add evidence to your paragraphs? The first thing you're going to do is find a piece of evidence that supports your ideas. And again, you're going to look for evidence in good sources. This can be a sentence or 2, sometimes statistics that support your idea. For example, if you're writing an essay about your city, you might want to say that the city where you live is safe. Well, how can you show that it's safe? You might explain that based on your own experience, it is safe. Like when you walk outside at night, you feel safe. But that's really just your own opinion or your experience. So then you would want to get evidence. In this case, we would probably look for statistics about crime rates to show how many crimes happen in that city. Or we might look for numbers that show how safe your city is compared to another city. That would be a good use of evidence. So again, the first step is to look for a piece of evidence. You also want to be sure that the evidence is directly related to the idea. That means that you have to read the evidence carefully. Sometimes with evidence, this can be tricky. So you just want to be careful that the evidence supports your idea. After you find the evidence that you want to use, it's time for you to decide if you're going to paraphrase or quote. Paraphrase means that you take the idea from the source and you put it in your essay, but you rewrite the sentence in your own words. Paraphrasing in another language is very difficult, so if English is not your first language, you probably need to practice this. It's not easy, but you can do it if you practice. Quote is different. Quote means that you take the sentence from the source and you copy it word for word exactly and then put it in your essay. And you begin and end the quote with quotation marks. That shows that it is a quote. Quoting is much easier because all you have to do is copy the sentence into your essay and add quotation marks. But we don't use quotes as often as we use paraphrases. We prefer paraphrases in our essay. So when you're deciding, should I paraphrase or quote, you're going to choose paraphrasing most of the time. However, it is okay to use a quote in the following 3 situations. Number 1, the sentence is said with very beautiful or special language. This is common, like if you get the sentence from a book that was written very beautifully, or from a poem, or maybe a speech. Perhaps if you paraphrase that, the beautiful language will be lost, so you want to keep the original sentence. Number 2, the sentence was said by a famous person. If you use a speech that was said by Barack Obama, you will copy the sentence and use a quote in your essay because you don't want to change the words that were said by a famous person. Number 3, if the sentence from the source includes so many very difficult words and specific terminology that it's very difficult for you to paraphrase it, then you can use a quote. In that case, you're going to use a quote to avoid making mistakes in your paraphrase or writing a paraphrase that is not clear. So now that you've decided if you're going to paraphrase or quote, it's time to add the evidence to your paragraph. So for this example that I'm going to show you, I am a student in a biology class and I am writing an essay about the disease malaria. We've talked about it a lot in class and I know enough about this topic that I can write an essay, but I'm going to need some evidence to support my ideas. For example, one of the things I want to say is that the disease malaria is very serious, that it kills a lot of people. So what I did was I went to my textbook and I looked for a statistic or some other evidence to show how serious this disease is. And I found this sentence that I want to use. This sentence is directly related to my idea, which is that this is a serious disease. So this evidence works because it shows how many people it affects around the world, or that it's a very serious and deadly disease. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to decide if I'm going to paraphrase or quote. So for this example, I'm going to paraphrase. Why? Well, first of all, because paraphrasing is preferred. Second, I'm going to think about the criteria for quoting. Is this said with very beautiful or special language? No. Is it spoken by a famous person? No. Is this sentence so difficult with very specific terminology that I cannot paraphrase it? No. So I'm going to paraphrase. So before I paraphrase, I'm going to make sure that I understand the meaning of the sentence. What does this sentence mean? Well, it means that when we look at all the infectious diseases around the world, malaria is number 5 when we think about the number of people who die. So I'm going to try to say that sentence in my own words, just like I did now when I told you what the sentence means. Here's my paraphrase. Among infectious diseases worldwide, malaria is number 5 in terms of the number of people who die. So you can see that my paraphrase is not fancy. In fact, it's a little longer than the original sentence, which usually is not really the best type of paraphrase. But for now, it's okay because my paraphrase is written in my own words, it's clear, and the meaning is the same as the original sentence. Next, to put the evidence in my paragraph, I need to do one more thing. I need to show where I got this information. This is called a citation. A citation is information about the source to show where I got the evidence. Is it from a book or an article? And then that way, the reader of the essay, my professor, can find this source afterwards. The other thing that I need to know is, does my class use MLA style or APA style? There are different ways to make these citations, and you have to know what style your class uses. For English classes, we use MLA. So in my class, we use MLA, but in science classes like biology, they use APA. So let me show you what MLA looks like first. We're going to use a signal phrase to show that evidence is coming, and we're going to include the author's last name and the page number. So here is my sentence with the citation. You can see that I have the name Pakenham. That is the last name of the author. But then I have these two small words, et al. What does that mean? That's an abbreviation that means and others. So when you use a citation, you're going to use the last name of the author, but if there's more than one author, then you need to follow a rule. If there are two authors, you just use the two last names. If there are three or more authors, then you use the last name of the first author, and then you use the abbreviation et al. To mean and others. Finally, at the end of the sentence, we put the page number in parentheses. This is the page number where I found the evidence. So again, the purpose of this is to show that this is not my idea, that I found this evidence in some source. Also, that way my professor can find this evidence later. The professor can go to the book and look at the page number to see the information. Most science classes use APA style. So in APA style, it's a little bit different. They don't include the page number for a paraphrase, and instead they include the year. So the year that the book was published. And here is what that would look like. Okay, so now that you have your evidence in your paragraph, you want to think about what you're going to do for the rest of your essay. And a good writer doesn't use the same words over and over again. So we're going to try to learn a couple of other ways to add evidence so that you don't repeat yourself with according to. So I'm going to show you 3 examples of how you can do this, and we're going to look at MLA style first. So the first one is what we looked at before. According to plus the author, comma, the paraphrase, and then the page number at the end. In the second one, we're going to add the article title. According to Pakenham et al., in the article, Malaria, a Portrait of a Disease, comma, the evidence or the paraphrase, and the page number at the end. Notice that for an article title, we put that in quotation marks. For the last one, we're going to begin with, in the article, Malaria, a Portrait of a Disease, comma, Pakenham et al. State that, and the page number at the end. Notice for the last one that we're using a verb to show what the author said. You can use state or claim or show. And you always use simple present tense. That's just a tricky thing that you need to remember. Even though the author wrote it in the past, we use present tense to show what the author says when you read it. Finally, I want you to notice that there is one other option that is a little bit easier. If you've already used according to a few times, then you can use this other one too. And this would be an example where maybe you introduce the evidence the first time with according to, and then after that you might use this one. In this case, you just have the sentence or the paraphrase, and then you just put the citation at the end of the sentence. So here you can see Pakenham et al. And the page number at the end of the sentence in parentheses. Let's look at these same examples in APA. Notice that for the first one, we're not going to include the page number, but we're going to include the year in parentheses that comes right after the author's last name. According to is not used in APA as often, so I'm going to move on to the next one with the author's last name and the verb. In the article, Malaria, a Portrait of a Disease, comma, Pakenham et al., 2013, state that. And the last one, we are going to do the same thing that I showed you before, where we put the citation at the end of the sentence. But again, just notice that you use the last name, comma, and the year. I suggest that when you write, you have these sentences printed out next to you so that when you're writing your essay, you can just copy those structures when you add evidence. We're almost finished, but I need to show you one more thing. Many of your sources are going to be from articles on the internet, and that is just a little bit different. So for an article on the internet, you're going to look for the author's name. If there is no author listed, then you're going to go to the second piece of information, which is the title of the article. Articles on the internet don't have page numbers like books do, so you're not going to use a page number. Remember that if you're using APA style, you need to include the year. And if there's no year listed on your article, then you're going to use the abbreviation N period D period, which stands for no date. So let's look at an example. Here's the evidence that I found in an article on the internet. The estimated number of malaria deaths stood at 405,000 in 2018. Here's my paraphrase. In 2018, the number of deaths caused by malaria was about 405,000. So we're going to put this evidence into the paragraph, and I need to first check if there is an author, and I'm going to use the author's last name. If I am using APA, I also need to look and see if there is a year. There are no page numbers on the internet, so I don't need to worry about that. When I look for the author's name, I notice that there is no author listed. However, this article is from the World Health Organization website. The World Health Organization is an organization or a group of people who wrote this article, so I can actually use that group's name for the author. So the paraphrase would look like this. According to the World Health Organization, comma, my paraphrase. Now, again, if I'm using APA, I would add the year. The last step is that you have to take all of your sources that you used in your paragraphs and make a list of them that goes on the last page of your essay. This page is called Works Cited in MLA. It's called References in APA. There are a lot of rules for how to do that, but it is something that you can do. But I'm not going to show those to you today. I'll make another video in the future that will show you how to do that. So to sum up, here are the basic things that you need to know about how to put evidence into your essay. First, you're going to look for evidence in reliable sources. You want to make sure that the evidence is directly related to the idea that you are trying to explain. Next, you're going to decide if you should paraphrase or quote. Remember that paraphrase is more common and you want to use more paraphrases than quotes. If paraphrasing is very difficult for you, just start with paraphrasing maybe one or two and then try to practice so that you can do it more often. Remember that it is okay to use a quote if the sentence is said with very beautiful or special language, it was spoken by a famous person, or it has very advanced, specific terminology that is almost impossible for you to paraphrase. Next, you're going to put that sentence into your essay, but you need to include a citation that shows where the information came from. What is the source? You need to know if your class uses MLA or APA, and then you're going to follow the rule for how to make the citation. Finally, don't forget to include the sources in a list that goes on the last page of your essay. This is called the works cited or references. My last piece of advice for you is don't feel scared. You can do these things, but you just need to pay attention and go step by step. There are lots of websites that have information about how to do this. So just keep practicing, keep trying, and you can do it. That's all for today. If you have questions, please let me know. And I would really appreciate it if you could give this video a like or maybe share it with other students that you know. Thank you so much and take care.